Yes, Mrs. Davis. Thank you for inviting me. I've wrapped up the case. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Um, that missing party girl, yeah, she's no longer missing. Well, the truth is she's no longer among the living, unfortunately. And, well, yeah, she's no longer missing. But I need to mention something else. That party girl who had the affair with your husband, she was pregnant. Oh, yes, yes, she was pregnant several months along by the time, well, and apparently that baby uh, definitely belongs to your husband. Well, besides what was left of the party girl, we found some papers in her motel room. I mean, it's rather amazing what can be done nowadays with parental DNA testing. It's not like it used to be in the old days. Nowadays, very advanced. So, yes, your husband was having an affair with her, as he admitted to you, and he got her pregnant, and then she vanished. Well, I found her. Oh, yes, I found her. Well, no, didn't find the baby. That was the one thing that seemed a little odd to me at first, but, well, sometimes things just aren't what they initially seem to be. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. Detective Hart, whom I worked for as an assistant, he solved that cult case when he was a member of the LAPD, and he gave all the credit to his partner, and his partner actually told the media, no, it was all Detective Hart. I barely had anything to do with the case. Who knows? I guess he had a guilty conscience. And then a year later, Detective Hart solved that very complicated racketeering case, and he brought all those men to justice. And then his wife had that unfortunate car accident, and he became a widower. And shortly afterwards, he retired from the LAPD and founded his own private investigation company. And ever since then, he's helped a lot of people. That's the way it initially seems. But that's not really the case. I'll be honest with you, Mrs. Davis. Some of that is true. Yes, Detective Hart did solve that cult case on his own. And then a year later, he took care of that racketeering case. Again, mostly on his own. But what happened to his wife wasn't an accident. Those men whom he had put away, locked up behind bars for very lengthy sentences, those men had friends, and they didn't like what he did to their friends. So they sabotaged his personal vehicle. Oh yeah, it wasn't an accident. The thing is, though, Mrs. Davis, after they did that, his wife decided to do a little bit of shopping. Unfortunately, her car was in the shop, so she just borrowed her husband's personal vehicle. And well, yeah, like I said, it wasn't an accident. Things got worse. Shortly afterwards, not being able to deal with the loss of his loving wife, Detective Hart started drinking, and he didn't stop. Now, at around this time, I was the one who founded the private investigation company, not him. And during my first 3 months, I ended up with one client, a very jealous man who insisted his wife was cheating on him and he wanted evidence for the divorce. Well, I only had to follow her one time to realize that wasn't the case. Jealous husband didn't want to pay me. Eventually I got my money, but the attorney I had to hire to represent me in court, yeah, he got most of it. I realized this wasn't going to work. So I asked a friend of mine who was good friends with Detective Hart's last partner to arrange a meeting. During the meeting, it was clear that Hart was drunk off his backside. But I really didn't need him to do any investigations. No investigative work whatsoever. I just needed him to be the face and name of my private investigation company. And that's what occurred. I had Hart call a press conference. I made sure he showed up to it sober, although an hour later, once again, drunk. But while he was sober for that hour, he made the announcement that he founded his own private investigation company, that he would be helping a lot of folks, and that I was his new assistant / partner. And that's what everyone believed. Of course, that wasn't the truth, Mrs. Davis. Not at all. I did all the work. He was the face of the company, the name behind the company, and I paid him for that service, ongoing. During the rare occasions when we had customers who insisted on meeting with him, I would sober him up just long enough for him to be his very pleasant and charming self when he was sober. And then I would shoo the customers out of the door so Davis could get back to the investigation. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say Davis? I meant Hart. Yeah, this particular investigation has caused me more than a couple of sleepless nights. I meant Hart could get back to the investigation, Mrs. Davis. But that's not what happened with this case. because unfortunately Detective Hart passed away a week after he promised he would take care of this for you. But then again, I don't think you really minded, did you, Mrs. Davis? No. Because the truth is, you knew that he was a drunk. You knew that he was just a shell of his former self. You knew that he was, well, that he wasn't long for this world because he couldn't stop drinking, that he was still in mourning for his wife. And you counted on that. You thought he became incompetent and that most people just hadn't have noticed because he took quite a few easy cases. Well, the more difficult cases, truth is, I handled pretty much all the cases. I needed the work. So if small, easy cases came along, I took them under his name. And when difficult cases came along, I was the one who took care of them. I pretended to be Detective Hart's very friendly, very helpful, and slightly incompetent assistant. That was the one thing you didn't know, was it, Mrs. Davis? No. No, you didn't know that. You didn't know that I was the detective at that private investigation firm who did all the work and solved all the cases. And all Hart had to do was sit back on his backside and chug as much booze as he wanted. I did feel sorry for him, but towards the end he was, well, towards the end I couldn't even sober him up to meet with clients. I always had to tell them that he was away on business in our British office. There is no British office, but that's what I had to tell clients. Yes, why couldn't they get a hold of Detective Hart for weeks at a time? Well, he was off in England. You know, it's good when the truth comes out. Usually. Sometimes not so much, Mrs. Davis. Oh yes, we found that party girl who wanted to keep the baby and she was going to sue your husband and all of that. Yeah, it's rather unfortunate. Well, Mrs. Davis, I know for a fact that your husband tried to buy her off, and the monetary amounts that he promised her were very generous. But for some reason, she just wanted to drag him through the mud to create this scandal. And let's face it, Mrs. Davis, a worthless party girl? What type of mother would she be? We both know the answer to that, don't we, Mrs. Davis? Yes, we do. I mean, she just wouldn't listen to reason. Here's a lot of money, one-time payment. Take it, leave, don't come back. But there was a slight issue, wasn't there, Mrs. Davis? You wanted her to leave, but not the baby. No. You and your husband never had children. Even though you're still relatively young, you could have a child. But, and with respect, Mrs. Davis, we both know what the issue is, and it's not with your husband. Yes. He's able to easily get some party girl pregnant on the first try. You wanted that baby, and you offered that worthless party girl a ton of money. What was her name again? Oh yes, Jen. Yeah. You offered her a massive amount of money. You offered her favors. All she had to do was keep her mouth shut. You offered her tons of prenatal care. Have the baby, just hand it to you. Everything would have been fine. But no, she insisted on keeping the baby. She insisted on dragging your husband's name through the mud, and your name as well by association. I can just imagine what happened when you found her in that motel room. I mean, what a worthless excuse for a young woman she was. All she had to do was listen to reason. I mean, she's a party girl. Why would she want to keep the baby? What? She was upset that your husband got her pregnant and refused to leave you for her? All that money he offered her? But I guess she wanted a hell of a lot more. I guess she wanted the money that you are entitled to, Mrs. Davis. Just wasn't right, was it? And that's why you put an end to her. Well, I found this underneath one of the beds. Yes. A promotional, cheaply made multi-tool. Davis Dry Goods engraved on the other side, with a folding pliers head. This would be a pretty good multi-tool if it wasn't so darn cheaply made, but it is an advertising item after all. And here's the other side. Your husband, he did love the color red, and he used it as the background for his business. This little red plate with the advertising for his company. And underneath that red plate, a folding knife that locks into place. A bloodied one. I guess that's what you used to take her out. Maybe not, but you definitely used the blade underneath that red plate to cut open her stomach and take that baby out. Well, she was 9 months pregnant and soon would be in the hospital anyway. So who cares? Well, that's the thing, Mrs. Davis. This advertising, cheaply made multi-tool with the folding pliers head that your husband wanted to use, it was unreliable. Only about 5 were ever made. Your husband has one, you have one, and the other 3 that were given away, oh, Mrs. Davis, The truth of the matter is, I'm a much better detective than Hart ever was. I tracked down those other 3. That means 4 of them are accounted for. And that one that I just held up in front of you, that one's yours. That's number 5. You made sure that worthless little party girl would never be a threat to you or your husband again. And you ended up taking that baby. I'm sure if the police came in here and searched, they'd find the baby alive and well. You've never given birth to a baby, but I can tell, Mrs. Davis, that you have very strong motherly instincts. Oh, Mrs. Davis, no. Please, don't reach underneath the desk towards that drawer. I've made sure that people know that I would be here speaking with you. And don't misunderstand, Mrs. Davis. I just came here to get paid because I'm done with this investigation on your behalf. You thought I was an incompetent fool, and you figured you could manipulate me just like you tried to manipulate Detective Hart with all that phony evidence regarding the girl's friends and her ex-boyfriend. No. The thing is, though, Mrs. Davis, I don't really care. That baby is better off with you anyway. So I'm not here to blackmail you. I'm not here to make your life miserable. Chances are you're reaching for a gun in a drawer. Forget it. People know I'm here. Best thing you can do is to just pay me what you owe me for the case. No blackmail. There won't ever be any blackmail. But, Mrs. Davis, I've documented this entire case. Now, one day, I might need a favor from someone in very high places. That's you. I'm just saying. Have a good one, Mrs. Davis.